Good evening, everyone. My name is Tom Landon. I'm moderating the meeting tonight. Mr. Kell is excused from the meeting, so I am here in his place. The board was in executive session. We're now back in open session. Like a motion from a board member to return to open session.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Then all in favor of returning to open session, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're back in open session. Tonight I'd also like to introduce everyone to Mr. Gary Campbell. Mr. Campbell is our newest board member. Welcome to the board, Gary.
Thank you.
And as your first elected duty, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Absolutely. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Gary.
Okay, we have a quorum of board members present. As I mentioned, Mr. Kell is excused tonight, but everyone else is here, so we have 6 out of 7. We are now at the first opportunity for public comment. Let me read the rules that we follow for public comment. The board encourages public expression. At board meetings, speakers may comment on matters related to any agenda item. The board won't permit in public session discussion involving individual district personnel or students. People wishing to discuss matters involving individual district personnel or students should present their comments and or concerns to the superintendent during regular business hours. All speakers are to conduct themselves in a civil manner. Personal attacks, obscene language, libelous statements, threats of violence, statements advocating racial, religious, or other forms of prejudice won't be tolerated. Total allocated time allowed for public comments, 30 minutes, with the option to extend by vote. There's 3 to 5 minutes allotted per speaker. We offer comment period at the beginning of regular meetings and a second period at the end, but generally not at special meetings. We do ask speakers to identify themselves by name and address prior to speaking. So first speaker, please step up to the podium, give us your name and address. Mr. Goldberger.
Yep. Okay, Jeff Goldberger, 1394 Coach Road, Minneapolis. All right. If you look out the window, there are several people outside who either medically cannot tolerate wearing a mask or supporting those who cannot. This is the second meeting that they have been refused entry without any effort to accommodate them. We've been dealing with the coronavirus for about 2 years now and have large amounts of data that we can analyze. Per the CDC website, there have been 326 deaths in the U.S. for individuals between 5 and 18 years old due to the coronavirus. For the same CDC webpage, there have been 6,968 deaths in the U.S. after receiving the COVID-19 vaccination. Let me repeat that. 326 deaths for individuals between 5 and 18 years old due to the coronavirus itself. 6,968 deaths due to the vaccine. That means the vaccine has caused 20 times more deaths than the number of school-aged children who have died from the coronavirus. This does not include any non-lethal adverse effects from taking the vaccine. Based on this data, unless your child has a unique medical condition, it does not make sense to give them the COVID-19 vaccination. We are also seeing more cases of vaccinated individuals getting and passing the coronavirus on to others, which means the vaccine is not as effective as originally expected or is now obsolete due to new variants of the virus. On the other hand, once infected, treatment is improving dramatically. Medicine is not stagnant. Technology, treatment methods, and threats keep changing, and each individual has their own unique body and situations. That is why allowing individuals to make their own healthcare decisions is not only the right thing to do, but it saves lives. If there is something worth standing up for, I would think protecting the rights of our teachers and staff would be one of them. We can help protect the rights of our teachers and staff by opposing unconstitutional mandates attempting to control what gets injected into their own bodies through coercion or other means. Thank you.
speaker? Yes, please. Can you please give us your name and address?
My name is Holly Burrows, 2641 Brookyard Road, Warren. I'm standing here today to explain to you that I would never abandon my students. They are the reason I'm here to do my job. It's not for the money. I'm dedicated to making sure that the students get their accommodations and the support that they need. And although I may not have given birth to them physically, they are mine once they come to that building to care for and to support and nurture. I advocated and fought for each and every one of them, just like their parents would. Imagine my horror on Friday, August 1st, when I learned about not only my termination, but the reason for it. I discovered this information on the Board of Education webpage under the Agenda tab. To my surprise, it states, resolved to terminate employment of Holly Burrows for abandonment of her teaching assistant position effective October 5th, 2021. This was a shock to me and a defamation of my character. I guess I was naive to think that the district would provide me with this information prior to that moment. And more importantly, I was told that I would not be permitted to work. So therefore, how can you consider that I abandoned my position? And I have the communications from the superintendent that state that I would not be permitted to work. My building principal told me to gather my things, and he helped me carry out my belongings. I am deeply saddened and dismayed that the district will not honor any religious accommodations that I or anyone else files. And yes, I did send in my religious exemption and accommodations not once, but twice to the superintendent. This ideology not only goes against the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, it also violates Title VII of the U.S. Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the New York State Executive Law, Article 15, Human Rights Law, Section 209 to 291, which protects employees from religious discrimination. I'd like to thank the parents of my students for reaching out to me. I so appreciate their kindness and support with this matter, for they know there are very few others that will fight for their child like I will besides themselves. I have colleagues that say this can't be happening. It's wrong. They've expressed to me that I'm an asset to the school, and I am extremely dismayed with the circumstances and the defamation of my character. Additionally, as a member of the district, I'm ashamed of the way you've handled the situation, and you are not upholding the middle school model of grit, generosity, generosity, respect, integrity, and trust. I would like to leave you with the knowledge that I have retained an attorney who is in the process of filing a lawsuit against the district and Onondaga County. In closing, I would like to thank each and every one of you for your time. Thank you.
Next speaker, please. And we also have a public comment section at the end of the meeting. So for anyone who may wish to speak after we conduct our business. So we'll continue on with the meeting then. Our next item of business is a special presentation for the 2020-2021 audit overview by Mr. Michael Hesson from Grossman Cinema.
I'll just do an introduction too. So just a special presentation that's reviewed yearly. This was going to talk about our year-end audit for 2021, or 2020-2021. Mike's just going to go over some high-level financial findings, how the district is doing financially, and I'm sure he'll be willing to answer any questions that you do have along the process. So, Mike, take it away.
All right, thanks. So I have a simple little presentation here that summarizes the audits that we did this past year. Just to give you a big picture standpoint, we did 3 different audits this past year. All 3 audits went extremely well. So that's all summarized throughout this presentation. So what I'll do is start off with, our agenda is just some of our required communications as auditors. We'll get to discuss with you. We're going to talk about the annual financial information.
the single audit, which is actually the compliance audit around federal grants, and then we'll talk about extra classroom activities, which is the student funds that we audit to. So, the next slide is really required communications. These are pretty standard communications amongst not just school districts, any type of entity. So basically what this says here is that we're required to perform your audit in accordance with governmental auditing standards, which we did with importance. So what they also call Yellow Book. So we follow those standards. You as the board and the ABF meeting that we had are requirements for governance, oversight of school district's financials. That's what that next bullet point talks about. And the third is basically saying that you have responsibility. We as the auditors have responsibility to give you an opinion on the financial statements, but you have the responsibility for ownership of everything else that goes into those financials. So we give you an opinion, which is about 3 or 4 pages long. Everything else is the ownership of, the board and management. So some of the other major required communications we talk about is some of the significant accounting policies. As you know, in your financial statements, they're very long-winded, meaning there's about 25 pages of footnotes to explain basic policy procedures from the district. These policy procedures are very consistent with the past year, meaning there's not a lot of major changes there. The only major changes past year is in what we call fiduciary fund financial accounting, is there's changes in accounting for that, which basically change some of those activities and move them to your governmental type funds. So that's disclosed throughout your footnotes. Significant estimates, not a lot of major changes here. One of the things I wanted to point out is, capital assets, you have depreciable assets, you depreciate your fixed assets. As you know, you have a lot of building projects going on. As you bring your fixed assets into service, we start depreciating those as estimates in the useful lives of that. Pension plans. You're actually involved in 2 different pension plans. Everybody is in the state of New York, both the TRS and ERS plans. And you don't really have a lot of control over those estimates. Those are estimated by the state of New York, but they are part of your audited financial statements, as you have what we call a proportionate share of an asset or liability. You can see what it did was summarize over the last 3 years, the asset or liability. What this is the amount that if everything came to an end as June 30th, the school district would either owe money or have money on deposit at the state from the pension plans. You can see this past year, the TRS jumped to a liability about $1.8 million. Reason is because of the market value of investments at the plan. It's measured almost a full year behind. So you're thinking about your financial statements are June 30th, 2021. The state of New York's measuring it as June 30th, 2020. And you recall there's a lot of market declines. So basically what happened is because the market value of assets across the state of New York declined, your liability actually increased a little bit there versus an asset in previous years. And what happened in ERS is actually measured as March 31st, 2021. So what that is, previous year you had a decline because of the same type of market value declines. This year was most picked back up. So most of those declines are very temporary in the plan. And ultimately what you're going to find is, one of the things I shared with ABF is that New York State pension plans are very well funded, both TRS and ERS. I believe ERS is close to 99% on a fiduciary, and TRS is about 97.8 right now. If you look at other states across the country, like we always use Illinois as an example, they're less than 50% funded. So meaning they promise benefits to both employees and teachers, and they really don't have the money on hand in the pension plans. So, any questions so far? The next slide talks a little bit, the next biggest, what we'll call liability, has estimates involved with it, is your OPEB, other post-employment benefits. This is actually for, you have active retirees and active employees that are earning a benefit, a health type benefit that will be paid at some future point. What this is basically the actuaries come up with an analysis saying at June 30th, 2021, right now, we would have to pay $48 million in to fund all the benefits you promised upon retirement. As you recall, in the past years when I might have spoke about this, is you're not allowed to fund this. There's no trust, you can't put money aside. So every school district has a really large liability such as this. Depending on the nature, every plan is a little different, so every school district is going to have a different number. But the reality is you can't fund this, you can't put aside reserves. The state of New York does not allow that. So everybody has this large liability that has a lot of estimates baked into it based on actuarial sciences. Basically what they try to do is project out healthcare trend rates for the retirees based on your current plan you have in place, which is really written into the union agreements and other arrangements with the employees. So pretty large liability. You can see it's pretty consistent over the last 3 years. jumped up to 38 million. A lot of this has to do with the demographics of, they do estimates of what they call gains and losses long term. And what they find is the actuaries, they look at the long-term trends and healthcare trends, and they try to readjust your plan. We saw this same type of kind of evening out in this past year. This is my probably 5th school district, and other than numbers being different, a very similar type of activity. So, the last bullet point is just your financials are fairly presented. Your notes, consistent with the previous year, other than the fiduciary activities, as I mentioned. Just to highlight that real briefly. Fiduciary activities in the past was a separate financial statement in your financials. There's actually like 3 sets of financials in your financials. What they call entity-wide financials, government funds, and fiduciary funds. All your fiduciary funds in the past, and it's been around for about 20 plus years, just got to eliminate under the new accounting standards called GASB 84. So basically what that did is all those type of activities, including extra classroom activities, and for you folks, you have a lot of scholarships. Those used to be accounted for in the fiduciary funds, now they're accounted for in the governmental funds and the general fund. The reason why the change here, really from your standpoint from school district, is you have what they call administrative oversight of these activities, meaning the board has to do something, give out the scholarship based on the wishes of the donor. So that puts you into what we call administrative oversight of those type of assets. So that basically changed the whole accounting for this. Probably for all our school districts I deal with, huge change, because they've been doing the same type of accounting for probably the last 30 years. So, but just to say that was adopted this past year. It was about $350,000 or total that was moved over from previous fiduciary funds. So.
And just to clarify, that movement to other funds, that's happening, that's not just like, oh, Skinny Atlas, you have to move it. That's due to a change in the way the schools in general have to do the accounting and tracking everything. Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
the accounting standard is called GASB 84.
Rolls right off the tongue.
Yeah, it rolls right at the top of your tongue. But no, I met with all our school districts. I work with 4 individual school districts myself and in charge of almost all my school districts in the office. And we went through everybody's analysis. Everybody got a little different flavor. Some have scholarships, some don't have a lot of scholarships, some have foundations, some don't. But basically, everybody had to adopt this, and some schools, it was a bigger impact than others. But it's nationwide, so it's not just the state of New York. This is accounting standards across the country.
Okay, thanks.
And just to point out, there really wasn't a lot of other accounting changes. With the ongoing pandemic, basically almost all accounting standards, except for this one, and audit standards were kind of deferred for the year down the pipeline. So this would have been implemented last year. They said, everybody else, hold off for now, and then they basically allowed this one to go through this year. So really the only major change is last year.
Thank you.
I'll go back one real quick one. You can see the first thing says, no difficulties encountered working with the management team here. Connor, everybody else has done an excellent job working with us, working through everything we needed to do. As I said, there's actually 3 different audits this past year. Very well organized, assisted us through the audits, so we got through everything pretty quickly without any major issues. We also discussed uncorrected or audit entries that usually happen. There's stuff that Connor and the team works with us, like on reserves, funding reserves. Those are very common. You don't wait till the auditor show up to book those type of reserves. They're not because you did an error or anything. So that's excellent job overall. You did a great job. Next item here, just kind of more standard stuff. I won't really go through all these items in detail. The only thing here is one highlighted in red is about the fact that because we help prepare the financial statements from information provided by Connor and his team, is that we have to stay independent of management. Basically what this says is we follow all the ethical rules and responsibilities that we can still prepare your financial statements even though that's not a part of the audit. So even though we have 3 sets of audited financial statements, we're still allowed to prepare those under professional standards, applying appropriate what we call safeguards. Some of the safeguards we do, we have to have another independent partner review everything in detail. We do that across the office. So you do get somebody independently reviewing everything, looking it over on top of your team to meet those requirements. So that just points out that we're still allowed to do that. There might be a time we're not allowed to prepare those 80-page document for you, and Connor will have to prepare them himself. We'll see. Most of our schools get nervous of that because the financials are not getting any shorter as the accounting standards get more challenging. So. Any questions so far before I jump into some of the non-required information. So, the annual financial statements are pretty similar to last year. The unmodified audit opinion is the only thing I really own. As I said earlier, unmodified is a clean audit opinion, meaning we have no modifications. Best type of audit opinion you get. There's, anything beyond that would mean that we had issues or concerns with your report, therefore we disclose that. But unmodified is the best type of opinion you can get on the audit financial statements. Really not a lot of changes on what's highlighted here. From last year, the only difference would have been is you had fiduciary fund financial statements. As I mentioned earlier, those went away. So the basic set of financial statements are very similar to past years. You can see your basic set of financials has up to almost 60 pages of information. No really major changes, as there wasn't many changes with accounting standards last year. Other than that, no. A couple other things we report on is report on internal control and any kind of compliance findings. You'll see that we had no material weaknesses or significant items to report, meaning that when we look at controls and processes, on the financial side, we didn't see any issues or concerns. We look at bank reconciliations, sign-outs, procurement, things such as that, that you're following, your finance team's following those process and procedures. We had nothing to report there. The one little compliance finding we'll say is a compliance, but very minor and consequential, as we call it, is that you're not supposed to have more than 4% of your fund balance carried over as we'll call, not earmarked for something else, like reserves or something else. So 4% is the limit. It's a state of New York limit. It's not an accounting standard. So basically you're at about 11.51%. So what that basically means is that over time you have to work that down because technically on paper you're not supposed to have more than 4% in the state of New York. What's happened is because of federal funding and other monies that people got, your general fund grew. Every one of my school districts in the same boat. Somewhere at the 20% level. They went from, very close to 4% and jumped way up. So they're working it down. Basically what will happen here is the state comptroller always gives you about maybe a 14, 18-month window to work this through. And I'm not going to speak for them directly, but they've kind of nonchalantly said, we're not too worried about everybody being over because we expect it in New York State that most people will be over. Most schools got a lot of funding they didn't expect. A lot of school districts also were expecting major cutbacks from the state of New York last year. In their budget, they were very conservative. And the state restored some of those dollars. So what basically happened at the end of the day is most schools will have a number greater than 4%. So that's also disclosed in the financial statements towards the back and one of the supplementary schedules. But very similar to all my school districts. I would say not one of my school districts is not over 4%. We have 10 of them in our office, so all 10 are over.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, we have roughly a 14 to 18 month window to get it back down to 4%, or that's like
showing a plan of
that's
work
a
it
target.
down. Yeah. With the federal stimulus monies, I'll say stimulus, but with the federal monies that are coming through, you're supposed to be using those monies first. So what's going to happen is they want you to use those monies first. So my sense is the old days of 18 months, I would say they're 20, because federally you have up to 2 years. You probably have between 24 and almost probably 30 months to work this down on paper. Because there's so much money that are being used to help support activities the school either spent money already on in the past year. You guys didn't use a lot of money for past years. You got federal dollars, you can go backwards in time, which is very rare. It's the first time ever I've seen that in grant money, that you go back a full fiscal year. So you have monies from the federal grants that are coming through you're going to use going forward, which once you use those up, you'll be back to leveraging your property taxes and state aid and work that down. And that takes in consideration funding all your reserves. I think on your agenda later on, I think there's an item there to approve the reserves being bumped up, say like the capital reserve that you're funding for $2.5 million, which was voter approved. That's already included as part of that 11%. So if you didn't have those reserves, that number would actually be even higher. The next slide is really what we call your single audit reporting package. What this is under federal grant compliance, you have to issue what we'll call a package, which includes your audited financial statements, which is item number 1. The report into control that we just talked about. We have a schedule of expenditures of federal awards. And in the past, last year when we were the first year audit for you, we didn't have to do this audit report because you didn't have over $750,000 of federal grant money. Once you get over $750,000, you have to have a compliance audit done. You're at the $800,848 in total. So this year was the first year you had a compliance audit done. With a compliance audit, what we did is we go through an audit in accordance with the compliance regulations of the Child Nutrition Cluster and IDEA. So basically, there's special rules we follow, not necessarily numbers driven, but processes. So we have to go through and check a lot of different processes and procedures against the federal rules or USDA for child nutrition, for example, and follow those type of. And you guys did an excellent job for being first time through it. It was a little challenging as the child nutrition person left, but was helpful on her transition to another school district. But you guys did a great job of following through all those rules and processes. And ultimately, what we find is anything greater than $25,000 problem gets reported to the state of New York, who then, upon acceptance of these audit reports from you guys, would actually send you a bill for wanting their money back. We have nothing to report there, so that's excellent. There's nothing to report.
So, can I ask a question? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So the special education cluster and the child nutrition cluster don't add up to the 848.
Yeah.
So where's that other chunk of money?
Okay. The single audit, as we call this, is actually a formally driven audit. We're required to audit a certain percentage of your total grants. So the $800,000 is totally part of your audit financials from the numbers. We audit from the numbers. For compliance and testing, we test at 275 and 312. And because you're the first year audit, we have to do at least 40% of your expenditures to get there. Since we have no findings next year, we can drop down to 25%. So basically, it's a formula that says we need to test these two significant programs, which they call major programs. So it doesn't matter where you are in the country, the formula for auditing is exactly the same. They could pick a different program, but your programs, these are the most two significant sized ones in the past year, so it makes sense for us to audit for compliance.
Oh, thank you.
So, schedule of findings and question costs, there's a summary in there required by the federal government, goes through that we basically have nothing to disclose. And then the last thing is summary schedule of prior findings. This is actually a summary not just for compliance, but anything related to the audit of financial statements is included in there. So this whole entire package is a public package. Once it gets submitted to what they call the Federal Audit Clearinghouse. It's a package you can see online. It gets certified by myself, Eric will sign it. It's an electronic signature, but the whole package goes there, including your audited financial statements, and is used by the federal agencies for oversight. So what they do is actually scan certain information. That's why this package is, in a PDF, readable. They do certain things, search for certain words, question costs, things like that. But since you have nothing to disclose, you'll get a little notice from USDA and some other folks from the Department of Education saying, hey, we looked at your audit, we didn't see any issues. Good job. See you next year. So it's interesting because now they've got a lot more on it. Last couple slides here, the extra classroom activity fund. As I mentioned earlier, the ECA, as we call it, is we have a cash basis of accounting for this financial statement. So basically, your audited financial statements are based on an accrual basis. This is a cash basis, meaning cash receipts, cash disbursements. So you can see we modify our audit opinion. So you probably heard me before say anything other than unmodified is not so good. Now, it's not so bad in the ECA world. ECA, every single one of our financial statements we issue, and other firms do the same thing, is a modified opinion. The reason we modify our audit opinion here is due to the cash receipt side related to student activities. Unlike a business that keeps track of what, say, number of tickets you sold and keep track of that in very detailed, it's very difficult to know from our perspective to, sold 100 tickets, we keep track of 100 tickets. We know every cash receipt you brought in, 93,000, we've audited it. But is there 193,000? So we modify our opinion just for that piece of it, and as it's carved out in the audit. We spend a lot of time with disbursements, making sure that the advisors sign off the expense, making sure the numbers tie out. They do a really good job there. Both Jamie and Amy do an excellent job, overseeing those and working with what I'll call the faculty advisors to make sure you're following the rules accordingly.
Okay. Sorry. Why are State Street and Waterman not listed on here? Why is it just the high school and the middle school?
I think we broke that out. That's just for summarization purposes.
Okay.
The financial statements in detail show all the clubs by individual. So this is just the highlight. So I think because we followed Jamie and Amy, just break it down.
Okay.
State Street and Waterman the kids don't deal with money. So they don't have actual clubs that deal with receipts and disbursements. It's just the middle school next door.
Our official ECA clubs. So the last slide really goes through, there's a few notes in here that, that describe the process you guys use. When I said earlier about fiduciary activities, the major change here is the extra classroom activities. It used to be in fiduciary funds that, we audited separately, but now they're included part of your governmental type funds. So that's what I wanted to point out, they're no longer counted as fiduciary. The reason is the state of New York basically said that there's a New York State education pamphlet that comes out that basically every school district says, follow that to your best, called Safeguarding Extra Classroom Activities. New York State Education Department puts it out. Pretty much every school district adopts it, part of your policies, your board policies has it, referenced in there. So basically because of that, you guys provided oversight with policies and procedures, meaning these are no longer fiduciary type activities. Even though they're actually student monies, can't really be used other than for the student activities, you do have oversight, meaning they get included part of your governmental type funds. So, you can see there's no significant matters to disclose or report to on these audits either. We also, every club's supposed to use profit and loss statements, and what we find is they're not readily used throughout every club. So we did see an improvement from last year, good, bad, or different. We did see you guys do a great job of kind of improving on some of the processes and procedures. But when you're dealing with students and changes in advisors and not sending out paperwork, sometimes some of the best practices are baked into the pamphlet. It's like running a Fortune 2 company. It's hard to do when you got the kids running it. So, but it's good. You guys have done a good job. Just something we bring out. So overall, all 3 audits went very well. Got a great team. Questions?
I just want to say publicly thank you to Connor and our whole business office team for how professionally you guys handle all this. This is infinitely complicated work, and to do it with the amount of attention to detail as they do is truly impressive, so thank you.
All right, board members, if there are no further questions for Mr. Wilson, then Mike, thank you very much. Appreciate the audit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Continuing on with the business of the board, I'd like a motion from a board member for consent on approval of minutes from the September 7th, October 1st, and September 27th ABF meetings.
So
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion on the motion.
Do you want me to just give a quick ABF update? So, the last ABF meeting, pretty much the entire meeting was taken up by the discussion of the audit, and Mike kind of talked us through what he presented tonight. And 2 other things that we touched upon. We talked about, for those extracurricular clubs, one of the things that we talked about in ABF was trying to somehow get maybe some students, either math students, business students, or that have some interest in this, helping the clubs with getting a P&L structure in place so that it helps the clubs, but it also gives some of our students some actual practical experience doing this. So I think Connor was lucky enough to say he'd look into that, but we're going to see if that's an opportunity so that it kind of lets us hit it from both angles. So it can benefit our students and it will help some of our clubs have a better understanding of operating their businesses, if you will. The other thing we spent the last portion of our meeting on was communication. So within ParentSquare, which is the new communication system we're using for our students, Connor was able to find out, and he updated me before we started, there is an option to add on for signing up for communication. So there's a district newsletter that comes out at the end of October, and there will be some wording in there for community members to opt in, because this newsletter goes to all of our households. So if you are a grandparent or a taxpayer or someone who just does not have kids in the district anymore, but you want to be apprised of what's going on, there are opt-in options to the ParentSquare platform so that you can be informed of some general higher level stuff that's going on in the district. So hopefully that will help us start to close the communication gap so that as we do things like budgets or school initiatives or just things that we would like the community to know about what's going on. This is an additional way for them to get that information. So like I said, that'll come out in the newsletter that comes out at the end of October. There'll be some wording on that and how to sign up for parents who aren't opt-in for community members that aren't actively parents in the district any longer.
Thanks, Danielle. So there is a motion on the floor for approval of minutes for 3 meetings, including the ABF committee meeting that Danielle just reported on. Further discussion on the motion? Okay, then all in favor of approving the minutes from those 3 meetings, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the motion does carry. Mr. Knuth, would you please provide the superintendent's report?
Absolutely, Tom, thank you very much. With 3 weeks behind us in school and or so, and a return to what looked like closest to normal as we've been in 20 plus months since the beginning of this pandemic. Actually invited our whole leadership team here tonight to talk a little bit about, very briefly, because they're all here, so thank you for that. But just to talk a little bit, basically about what challenges we're seeing as kids have returned to school after really 2 years of disruption to their formal education. We had conversations this week amongst our team where we're realizing that, you know, a 2nd grade student or a 3rd grade student has never had a full year of in-person instruction. My oldest child is a sophomore in high school, and you realize it was her 8th grade year. That was the last full year of uninterrupted instruction that she had. So there's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of things that we're seeing. We're still beginning to understand fully what it means for all of our kids to come back. But overwhelmingly, the spirit and the energy and the positivity of having all of our kids back in school and some of the creativity from our leadership team here and our building leaders to recreate as close to normal as possible the student experience at their schools has been really an amazing thing to see, and our kids really appreciate it. So with that, to talk a little bit about what challenges they're seeing and a little bit of academic highlights, I'll start with Mr. Greg Santoro, our high school principal.
Thank you, Mr. Knuth. Good evening, everyone. Special congratulations and welcome, Mr. Campbell. Welcome to the board and welcome to this capacity with us. Greg Santoro, your high school principal, been here for 9 years. So, yes, Mr. Knuth said it was quite the opening. It was an exciting opening for everybody, primarily for a full capacity. You know, seeing our students back into the hallways and our teachers are just excited. It's been great. We try to be and having maintain normalcy. You know, we had a Spirit Week. We culminated with a homecoming dance, which was outside. We had our activities fair today. So we're trying to continue what we always do for our students, to give them those opportunities. What we have noticed, you know, in a typical year, you have a summer slide. You look at those 2 months off, students come back, you have an academic slide, we call it. Now add a COVID slide to it. And so now we've talked about it, we planned for it, but now when students are here, we can feel it in the classrooms, there is that academic gap. And those are the things that we've been looking at and focusing on as well. Also, management overall. You know, when you now have a full capacity, students aren't used to being so close to one another in that whole environment in the hallways. So you look at hallway management, classroom management, large group area management. We almost have to kind of go back and reteach and renormalize what we do in high school and having our students understand there's a right way to do things and there's not an appropriate way to do things. So we did notice some of the activities, especially in our homecoming dance. It was outside. It was a beautiful night on the turf, something we've never done before. But some of the activity and some of the behavior was, okay, all right, we got to come back and kind of renorm how we do things here the right way. And that's what we have to do with any type of a slide. So we're looking forward to months ahead. We have our whole team here, so we'll talk about other avenues, but very excited for the opening. We're looking forward to our months ahead for sure. Welcome, Mr. Campbell.
Oh, can I ask a question?
Sure. Before Greg runs away.
Yeah, before you run away.
Do you think with the students you're seeing a bigger struggle to adjust academically, there's more of an academic side, or an like a time management, this is what it's like to be back in school full time and play a sport or do the play or whatever, and I'm feeling overwhelmed. Where's the bigger concern from the
I
staff?
think it's everything together. Right now it's a perfect storm. about. You know, we are coming back to some normalcy. That's different for students. I do think that summer slide plays into that, and also with the COVID approach too. So I think it's a little bit of everything. I do sense there is that anxiousness, when the students are walking through the school, they see a lot of us together now, prior to just having half of the population. So that's a big change for sure. And I think, again, it's just these activities. We haven't had a dance, in a year and a half, and we haven't had a spirit week. What does that mean? Coming together, right? So that's all kind of new. But I think as we continue to normalize, Mr. Major, we're looking at, again, going back to our management and what that looks like. We'll get back to it later way we'll promise to. It's just going to take some more time.
Can I make a quick comment? So I think we kind of have like a gentleman's agreement / understanding a couple of years ago when the wellness committee was going about really teachers kind of communicating and there not being any more than 2 tests in one day, doing the best we possibly could, understanding that sometimes that might not be possible, but maybe a reminder of that, because I've heard quite a bit of that there was 3 tests in one day the past couple of weeks, and between sports, and it was overwhelming. And I think kids, when they were remote, they could kind of take their test when they wanted to, and so that's just one thing I'm hearing. I do appreciate the dance on the turf. I thought that was, really thinking out of the box. I thought that was a great idea, so thank you.
Well, I appreciate the feedback. Thank you, because we don't want our students to have 3, 4 exams a day too, so we'll continue that. And again, that's kind of coming back to normalcy too.
Right, exactly.
What it looks like. So.
Right. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Gregory.
Thank you, Gregory. I'll have Mr. Cohen, our STEM coordinator, speak next. Thank you, Brian.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Thanks for having me. So first, I just want to say we're thrilled to have all of the students back. The energy in the building is amazing. School is a lot better with students in it. All of them 5 days a week. That's what we signed up for. Nurturing relationships, connections, and learning is a lot easier in person. That's what we're about this year. That's what we're always about, but that's what we're focusing on this year. Last year, Skinny Atlas was able to provide more in-person instruction than almost any other school district, definitely any other locally. Very fortunate to be able to say that. In order to pull it off, unfortunately, one of the things we had to sacrifice was some of our academic interventionists who taught in classrooms last year in order to keep our class sizes small so that we could open. It's definitely the right move to make. It's not something we would have normally chosen to give up under normal circumstances. And there are definitely consequences of it. Now, fortunately, we were able to restore those positions this year. We're all thrilled about that. That's great. But some of the consequences include things like intervention starting a little bit slower this year because we don't have data from last year. Normally, we would have had interventions going last year, and we would have progress monitoring data of how kids were responding to those interventions last year. Since there weren't interventions, we don't necessarily have the data from that. So we're sort of restarting. It just takes a little bit longer. There's a challenge there, and then certainly, as maybe related to some of what Mr. Santoro was saying, there's a summer slide, there's a COVID slide, and for our students who would normally get an intervention, that might be a little bit more. So we feel fortunate to be back up and running, but there's definitely a challenge in doing that. Where are we now? At this point, we've either finished gathering all of the data and finished doing all of the screenings, or are just wrapping up for a couple of new interventions that we're able to offer. Very lucky to be able to start with some new targeted interventions for kids who have particular needs, and we can focus in a more strategic way on exactly what they need. And those interventions are starting, or have already started. And that'll bring me to maybe, a brag or celebration related to that. We said as an administrative team that one of the things we were going to focus on in terms of curriculum and instruction this year in the math world And thrilled to be able to say at this point we've developed resources already for multiplication and division for 3rd and 4th grade. 4th grade has already started using them. 3rd grade will when we finish the appropriate unit. Already started some professional development on implementing those. I'm generally teaching and learning fast. And then specifically on the resources that we're using. So excited that teachers are learning and leaning into a discussion on developing fluency, more so than we have in a very long time. And at Waterman, we're about to begin those conversations at the coming October faculty meeting. So I thought this was a nice example of a spot where COVID sort of caused a challenge that maybe wasn't there before. Or it may be exacerbating something where our kids could always be a little bit better with their facts. And we leaned into it. We didn't run away from it. We spent some time over the summer developing stuff, starting some professional development. We started strong in the fall, and we're off and running. The strategic focus on fact fluency is really important to us, not because this is the highest bar of mathematics that we're shooting for, not up there talking about like all of our kids getting through calculus, but it is a foundation for all of the mathematics that follows it, freeing up your working memory to do multi-digit computation or work with fractions, everything else that's built on single-digit computations. So our teachers are leaning into it, our administrative team is leaning into it, and I guess I'm just happy that our attention is matching our needs. And thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Do you mind
Yeah,
asking?
absolutely.
Do you think, and I know you just said you're wrapping up the assessments, but if you had to just guesstimate, do you think the amount of students needing intervention services is going to be on par with what it used to be in a normal year, or do you anticipate having a significant increase in students? And if you can say we don't know yet, that's okay.
So to some extent we don't know, and it will fluctuate throughout the year. In my head, as I'm sitting here thinking, it's hard to gauge. Because last year, there was a higher need because the interventions weren't there, so kids were struggling because we didn't have the extra support for them, and because of the school stopped in March of the previous year. So I'd say this year doesn't necessarily feel as bad as last year, maybe because we're actually able to do something to support them, and that feels good. Definitely we've been able to put some additional supports in place at the high school. We got really creative, I think we spoke last spring about that, in terms of some specific ways for supporting high school students where there's more time for those gaps to have gotten bigger. I guess I would say I don't think it's necessarily hugely different than a pre-COVID year, and possibly better than at least it felt last year. To answer it more specifically, I actually need numbers, and I just don't have that yet.
That's okay. That was sort of a, well, because my follow-up question is I'm going to channel my inner Mike Kell, who would say this if he was here. We're here to support you. Make sure you ask if you need more help. If you guys get through this and say, holy cow, there is a much bigger need than we anticipated, don't say it amongst yourself, because as a board, we can't support you with that. So make sure that it moves up to us. I feel like Mike says that anytime we have these conversations, which is why I'm repeating it. Make sure we are aware if you need more supports, if there is a way that is feasible for us to do that as a board and provide the students with those supports. We have to know about it, because we can't help if we don't know.
Two things just to jump in on real quick. Thank you, Brian, first of all, for describing that so well. The other thing we're looking at a lot, and we've been talking about a lot, and trying to figure out is consistency. In keeping with that 4 great schools becoming 1 great district model, how we do these interventions, how we record them, how we communicate to parents. We're paying a lot of attention to doing that consistently across the districts, whereas it may have been a little bit different in the past. So that's something that we're spending a lot of time on. And then the other thing, in keeping with your offer of support from the board, and I see Heather Carroll sitting there from our Skinny Atlas Education Foundation. I had a great meeting with them today, and I apologize, Heather, I snubbed you in my opening there. But the Skinny Atlas Education Foundation that we have is a really unique resource to support our teachers, to support our programs, to support new initiatives, and just unbelievable creativity in the school district. So I had a great meeting today with Heather and the team from SEF, and they too are there to meet with us. The plan is we're going to invite Skinny Atlas Education Foundation to our next cabinet meeting so that we can brainstorm ideas, and then our building leaders and administrators can share that throughout our faculty.
And so thank you to the board for that support. We're truly fortunate to be in a district where we have that support and with the resources to be able to attack problems when we identify them, and to have partnerships, strategic partnerships in our community. And thank you to the teachers, because it's a lot of work. They're coming back to hard work of teaching, and we're asking them to simultaneously engage in a lot of learning. And it gets tiring, and they lean in every time because it's what is best for kids, and that's what they do.
Well said, Brian.
We're blessed to have them.
Thank you for saying that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Francine. Francine is our humanities student.
Good evening, Board of Education members, Superintendent Canopy. Welcome, Mr. Campbell, to our all here in our family, and other Skinny Atlas employees that are part of our cabinet and support team. I'm Francine Grinnell. I'm the K-12 Humanities Curriculum Coordinator. I started my 4th year in the district. Prior to this, I was in Syracuse City School District for 18 years, and Fayetteville Manlius prior to that, as different capacities as an administrator and an educator. And I have the pleasure of actually combining all of those jobs into what I do, supporting teachers as a coach. I push in and model in the classroom in terms of lessons, sit down and have data dialogue conversations, and then support them with the implementation of New York State learning standards, specifically with their curriculum, instruction, and assessments to make sure that's aligned. A couple celebrations specifically, like when we think about how does this relate to actual stories that hit home to talk about our students and teachers. We had 7 students last year graduate with the seal of Literacy, which is a very special honor. They had to show proficiency in both English at a very high level, multiple measures, as well as a second language. So to have 7 students in a small school district with it's just phenomenal, a testament to both our students, our teachers, our community, and our family members. Also, kind of connecting to the Skinny Atlas Education Foundation, their support with our literacy effort, which I'll talk about in a moment, has been phenomenal, recognizing our kind of diving into the science of reading and evidence-aligned practices to ensure that we're keeping, just as all practitioners do, we keep thrust to the skills and the best research we have available to be practitioners within our field to deliver the highest quality instruction to our students. 8 of the grants this summer that teachers applied to actually had something to do with our curriculum adoption of Wit and Wisdom in grades 3 through 8. Teachers were so inspired after 1 year of implementation that they wanted to take time over the summer and travel and learn more about some of the places that they were teaching their students about so they could bring more relevant, real-life examples into the classroom. So in addition to supporting the curriculum in that capacity in a variety of ways, we're really excited to be able to support teachers building awareness and understanding of the culturally responsive sustaining framework in education. So this culturally responsive sustaining education framework is grounded in 4 principles: welcoming and affirming environment, high expectation and rigorous instruction, inclusive curriculum and assessments, and ongoing professional learning. That ties in really nicely with building connections, relationships, and learning. And all of these things were in place, and we're just further thinking about and reflecting on what does it mean to have a welcoming and affirming environment for everyone? What does it mean to have high expectations and rigorous instruction? What can we do slightly different, or what are we already doing that confirms having an inclusive curriculum, and what can we do differently? So in addition to that, the past few years, as I said, we've been focusing on our literacy instruction, building awareness and understanding around evidence-aligned practices. And this year, we're leveraging that foundation that we built to ensure that we're focusing our instruction on greatest standards work rankings, kind of to impact our instruction to award reading. So kind of getting to some of the gaps that we were seeing. Students may have been in and out of classrooms for various reasons. We had high quality instruction, but we have in place now systematic explicit instruction towards phoneme proficiency, which we know is a key indicator for literacy proficiency, phonics instruction, total word structure, and then giving students the opportunity to apply those skills in tough context. You wouldn't learn a bunch of isolated skills associated with sport, like golf, and then never go out and play the game. So we want to give students that pathway to go out and practice those skills in real life context and build knowledge, vocabulary, and background knowledge. And in addition to that, we're really thinking about how our entire literacy block is supporting our students, including writing, knowledge building, vocabulary, student discourse, how are students using their discourse and talking about what they know, so that helps them to prepare what they're going to write about. So lots to celebrate. I would say the biggest challenge right now I'm facing has nothing to do, it's more of the supply chain. We placed orders over the summer on products and goods that we can't get in because of plastic or plastic not being available, or warehouse shortages of workers. So those are some of the things, and we're still waiting on things, orders that we placed in June and early July. So that's probably the biggest piece right now that's a challenge. And I look forward to sharing more with you throughout the year, and thank you for your time.
Can I just ask a quick question? Do we still have a direct bridge between our schools and the reading week with somebody pushing it? I know we had lost, I can't remember her name, the person who.
Katie Sojewicz.
Thank you.
Yes, they stole her from us.
Yeah. So has she been replaced?
Yes. In fact, our district, we're sending 23. I worked with John Lawrence to coordinate sending 23 teachers and educators virtually to attend the Reading League conference coming up next week, that they'll actually attend the sessions outside of the workday to build their knowledge and continue to share out with us what they've learned. So the Reading League coach was a grant that we received, or kind of an in-kind gift, so to speak, from the Reading League. We didn't pay for that. And the transition, Katie became the director of professional development at the Reading League. Somebody was appointed that we already knew and had a relationship with, but who she wasn't able to continue with us this year for other reasons. And it took some time, but we have identified a coach that will be starting with us this month. Sherry visited State Street last week to meet some teachers, and we look forward to not only the coaching, but the ongoing professional learning that Katie Sojewicz will actually be implementing for us and facilitating. So monthly we'll have topics, and then coaching will be 2 days a week spread across the district.
And just one quick one, same question I asked Brian. Do you feel like the amount of students that need reading support is about average, or are you seeing a higher need coming off of this?
I don't have the actual numbers in front of me. But
That's okay, yeah, and I'm not trying to catch you, I'm just trying to get a
But I would say it's a slight tick up, slight, because as Brian said, some of the students that did need, some additional support, that we tried our best to leverage the Tier 1 curriculum and do what we could within that setting. That some of those gaps that we didn't address in the ways that we normally would, we're addressing now. So I wouldn't say it's a tremendous amount, but I think that whole child aspect is coming into play. And we're trying to tease out a little bit, is it that they don't know the skills, or are they just not used to doing school?
Right.
Are they just not used to being in the school all day? And today we met with the third grade team and our intervention and special education teachers throughout the day, and we were talking about third graders are just getting that stamina to actually do school, do some of the work that we're asking them to do in the afternoon. So I think it's just taking time for that adjustment, and I think we see that what makes sense for that child at that grade level across that continuum.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Francine. Mr. Brown, Waterman Elementary School Principal.
Good evening, everyone. How are we doing? How's everybody? How are you? Keeping sanity is challenging. We're doing it. It's good to see everybody tonight. Thank you. And again, welcome. Glad to have you. And I know, wonderful guy. It's great to have you here. Some of the challenges that I want to talk about tonight
tonight. I don't think it's a huge challenge, but it's a notice. You know, it's a notice that we see. There's and I'm thinking of like our little incoming, because you know last year we did have our current first graders and second graders in school 5 days a week, and we did have the majority of those children. We didn't have too many remotes. I think we had started out with about 30 and then wound up with about 5 at the end. So so we did have a lot of kids last year, and so they were receiving, of course, instruction every day. But one of the things that we are noticing a little bit is those little incoming, they're wonderful, they're beautiful little children coming in. But there are some things like they didn't really have a complete preschool program, and some of them didn't even, didn't have a chance to go or whatever. So we see a little bit more like, I want to stay with mom, just like some immature kind of like maybe behaviors, but we meet them where they are, you know that every day, and we're shaping and molding and they're fine. But I do see a little bit in that sense of they just didn't have the complete, a lot of them didn't have the complete experience of finishing the whole preschool, so that's just one, it's a very small challenge, but we're overcoming it. We love them all, they're great. The more time they spend with us, the more skills they'll have to do school. It's like learning school. They're doing great in the cafeteria, by the way, those kindergartners, they love it. Also, that sometimes the inconsistent and changing, CDC, health department things, those can be confusing and time consuming. Luckily, I have a wonderful nurse, Katie Lawrence, that we hired last year, who works really closely with us and the other schools. We always are asking each other questions, and Katie says, I'm going to check with the other nurses so that we can be consistent. We're always talking about, trying to be consistent. And in this world of changing rules, it's hard. So we're trying, just so you all know, we're trying very hard. On a high note, I am very proud of the teachers at Waterman. I am so proud of that group of people. As you've heard, there are many challenges, many things that they have had to learn, and they've had to step out of their comfort zone so many times in the last 2 years, and they've done it. I'm also really proud of our students. One of the things that Ms. Grinnell talked a little bit about was the implementation of some of our research-based programs in literacy, and I see some really good consistency going on with those. We work together to figure out how are we going to implement these types of things. And the newest program, one of the new programs we're using called Haggerty, is built around the phonemic awareness and phoneme proficiency piece. I've talked a little bit about it before. Provide students with consistent and repeated instruction so that they're getting it, again and again, because you don't get it once and then learn it. Especially when you're learning to read, we've always said it's rocket science. But what they're getting from this program is transferred to the students' decoding and, of course, encoding, so spelling and writing skills as well. Helps them to do all that stuff. All students at Waterman participate in the lessons as part of that Tier 1 curriculum in kindergarten, first grade, and second grade classrooms. And I know it continues on to State Street, which is really nice. Students spend time learning and practicing in the daily lessons that teach the early basic and advanced skills. The things that they're learning are things like rhyming and onset fluency. So, the kids are learning, of course, with scaffolds for each grade level, but, thinking of, they need to hear those sounds and words and hear words that rhyme. So cat, sat, fat, hat. Isolating final and medial sounds. So, what sound do you hear at the beginning of cat? What sound do you hear at the end? What is the middle sound? So we're doing all that, and there's no print involved. There's nothing. It's just all, it's all coming from you because you can do phonemic awareness in a dark closet. There's no symbols that are associated with it. We bring in the symbols, of course, but not while you're practicing with Haggerty. They're also blending and segmenting words, syllables, and phonemes. So let's make all the sounds in the word cat. Cat. We want them to be able to do that. Adding and deleting phonemes is a big part of it. So let's take the word at and add s at the beginning. And what do we hear? Sat. We want them to be able to do those types of things. And then phoneme substitution is another piece. So let's take the word car and add s, and scar is the new word. So those are the kinds of things that they're practicing every day. It's not a program that takes a lot of time. It takes about 15 minutes per day to do it. And it's built right into the teacher schedule, so we're seeing lots of teachers are absolutely doing it. We've had some great professional learning that we've had in the summer and leading up to this, also from our reading league coaches who did some professional learning with us. But it's turning out to be very good, so the teachers are really enjoying it, and the kids love it. I get to see them doing it, they're doing a great job with it, and I think it's going to make a really big difference, not only in the phonemic awareness realm, but in the proficiency of phoneme. And again, you know, then we'll, of course, each program scaffold, so it's not SAT and CAT in second and third grade. We're working with, you know, diagraphs, all those other types of things once they get up there. So I'm really proud of that. I think the teachers are doing an excellent job at it, and I think we're feeling very well supported in implementing. So that's one of the things I thought I would highlight tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Brent.
Thank you. Questions? All right.
Okay, taking it easy on Mr. Brown. Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you.
I could say I love that Jim is back every day.
The short straw, the long.
Seriously, I don't know if you've heard me, Pat, but I could say I love that Jim is back every day.
Oh, every day,
Because a wiggly body can't learn, and I love that that is back in the Waterman schedule every day.
We do too, because they need to release.
Yes.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to be up here again in front of all of you all. So thanks for making the time tonight to share all this experiences that we're having this school year. So at State Street, and again, Mrs. Grinnell and Mr. Bonner talked about some of the academic challenges and successes we've had at State Street. But just to make it really clear, the things that we identified in the past year was what can we do for these students that typically receive these services from our experienced specialists, and how do our classroom teachers now, how do they feel that capacity to give those kids what they need when those supports are removed, when our specialists are now classroom teachers sharing an experience next door to them. So all last school year, teachers were asking, what can we do for these students that we don't have Ms. Montreal or Ms. Bohr. So they took that challenge from us, the coordinators, myself as the principal, and we asked them, what is it you need? And they said they needed more training, they need more support, they need more professional learning. So this year, and the end of last year, we worked incredibly hard to put our teachers in positions to be successful. And so, Mrs. Fleckenstein, to answer your question about the number of students that are receiving interventions or need support, I can say at State Street, there's going to be more kids than ever that receive support, because now it's our special education teachers, it's our intervention specialists, it's our classroom teachers, it's our teaching assistants that have all learned in the past 6 months that can support these students in whatever way they need. So there are going to be more students, not necessarily because the data suggests that, but we have the capacity to see more students, which is a great position to be in. The other things that we've been really fortunate to have successes that we've seen is that team approach that we have between coordinators, directors, whether it's Mrs. Whipple, whether it's Mrs. Buff, whether it's Francine or Browning, or our new set member, Mrs. Moses. We have a team-based approach that whatever students need support, or we need an explanation, or we need help, we can reach out to anyone in this room and have that collaborative discussion. We can rely on professionals in the district office or in other buildings, and the teachers know who to turn to when they have questions. So that's a great way to see the successes that we've learned from last school year. The other things, having field trips back open right away from day one. We've already had 2 5th grade classes that have gone to Ravenna Springs, talking to the SCF and finding ways that we can utilize the community resources we have to bring experiences into our building, and making sure our students are having those experiences outside of the classroom, outside of the building, in field trips, in guest lectures. We had our fire safety come in yesterday, which is a great thing we couldn't do last year. So trying to build those normal events and experiences for our students that they can take in all the community the region has to offer. It's been fantastic. So lots of challenges, lots of silver linings though that we've taken from those challenges. I think we've gotten better because of the 18 months of COVID pandemic that we've experienced. So we're fortunate to be in the position we're in. We're fortunate that last year that we had 92% of our students in the building 5 days a week. And the one success, or the one real blessing that we had, I think for all 4 of us principals, we're not operating 2 different schools. We don't have that remote section that we had to worry about. That was a whole separate school that we had to manage and learn from last year, and how to make sure
we're giving the remote students everything they need, while our in-person students are in front of us. So that's brushed aside. We have all of our kids 5 days a week, which is just a fantastic place to be. So we're off to a great start and great things to come as teacher.
So, just a question, unless anybody else has one.
Go ahead.
Just wondering, do you think overall for your students the biggest challenge is an academic side or just that mental, emotional
I think
overload of having to come back to school 5 days a week in person?
I
And
think
some of these kids haven't been in school, like the third graders probably haven't really been in school since kindergarten, you know, in a full normal
Right.
year.
I think it goes back to what came first, the chicken or the egg. You know, are they having issues, you know, social, emotional issues or behavioral issues because they're learning stuff? Or are they having trouble with learning because they have social, emotional issues going on at home or in the community? So using that whole child approach, I think there's definitely more students that are, you know, we see test anxiety or worry about grades in elementary school. We see that in our students. We kind of want to wash that away and change that model from we're not testing you, we're testing us. If you do poorly on a test, that just tells us what we have to do better. So kind of taking that lens for the students to take away that anxiety. I think it's increased a certain percentage for all students. So we are seeing a little bit more.
I just kind of wanted to reiterate what Danielle had said earlier about, you know, make sure if you need more support to get the interventions done, that, you know, you reach out and that gets to the board level, so that we're not pushing too much of the tier 2 interventions onto the classroom teachers and making sure that we can hit all of our kids where they need and what they need in those small groups. So just kind of channeling what she already said.
Thank you, Mrs. I appreciate that. I think the biggest challenge is trying to how do we put it all in one day? How do we make sure state treats that fun, exciting place where every child feels special and every child feels excited to come to school, but also making sure whether we're hitting those academic needs and those social emotional needs as well. The challenge is the day is not long enough. I'm not sure if we're going to fix that right now, but we're trying to balance it all out. So thank you.
Thank you, John. Mr. Garache.
Y'all want to stand up for a second? I really heard my knees crack. But I promise I'll be a little shorter than I was last time. Welcome, Mr. Campbell. Mr. Campbell and I are neighbors. So this is great. Well, we're all neighbors, right? This community, but he's literally my neighbor, which is awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And thank you all for the opportunity to speak in front of you tonight. Talk about challenges, and I think most of our colleagues here have touched on the challenge. The challenge coming back from essentially 2 years of not having a normal school year. Even as we did, as Brian mentioned, compared to a lot of our counterparts, we provided in-school learning for most of our kids and did a tremendous job. Proud of our teachers and our community for the support throughout all that. We were still in a pandemic. There's still stress from all that. There's still anxiety from, from all those pieces that have an impact on the child. We talk about the whole child. So the biggest challenge for us is just having kids seem a little more sensitive. Kids seem a little more, still trying to adjust to that full day. You know, it ranges, right? There's some kids that might not be a piece for them. But we usually have some kids who have demonstrated some anxiety. We seem to see a little bit more of that so far as we started out the year. And I think it's an adjustment because in the middle school level, if you think about that 2 years, a sixth grader, in some ways is still fourth grade, and so on. And so like Francine said, that continuum is the piece that we're working for. And I think the biggest challenge, as we recognized, whether it's post-COVID, pre-COVID, the main aspect for us as a community to have a successful school, and we do in many, many ways, and one of the greatest things about our school is that we're always looking to continuously improve on that, but it is the relationships, it's the connections. If you can have a student come to school and feel comfortable in that environment, and feel like they have support, that they're being cared for, then they can perform in the classroom. And when our kids walk into our hallways, and coming back to this year, you see it even more. You see smiling people. People are so excited to just have everybody there. And yes, we're wearing masks, but it's close to normal as a school year as it was before all of this. And they are just happy. And that is something that permeates the whole building. People are happy to be there. People are proud to be able to work with these kids. And we are just working through each and every day, trying to have as normal as the year we have. Tomorrow we got the dinosaur barbecue, so that's that's awesome. We got support our student council and the shopping spree. We've got activities coming up, dance. We've got a dance coming up later in the month. We're working on field trips for kids in 8th grade. Just great stuff. And we've got an awesome team. And the things we talked about, the data, so you want to hear about data. One of the terms I hadn't heard was bag data, right? So behavioral, right? Behavioral assessment, right?
Behavior,
Attendance and grades.
and discipline, yeah.
Yeah, so
I mean,
great.
yeah, and grades.
Behavioral, attendance,
Late.
and grades, right? It's late, right? This bag data, I'm telling you, you might want to stand up. But you get those are things that we're looking at and trying to just make sure that we're wrapping kids in support. We're recognizing if they're not there. And a lot of the kids that haven't been as a result of quarantines and things that we can explain. But when there's a situation where they aren't, we can get our arms around that child and we can get them what they need. So excited. So I think I might have mentioned some challenges and some academically, for us, those pieces in terms of the sensitivities of the child. But we have the Ames web screening that we've done, information from last year's teachers. We're looking at those data points that I just mentioned, and we're really happy to have that academic support, staff, and the reading support that we didn't have last year. So off to a good start.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's take your suggestion and take a 1-minute recess.
Sure. Stretch out.
I got one that I not the special left here. Separate it out.
We'll announce the next speaker. Continue on with the
Yes, unless people switch seats and are trying to confuse me now, I'll invite Mrs. Moses up.
Oh. Sorry, my son was just calling me. Good evening, everybody. Good to see all of you. Welcome.
Thank you.
So nice to meet you. I'm so excited that you're here. This is wonderful. I'm Sister Moses. I'm the coordinator of Student Support Services and Family Engagement. And as my amazing colleagues have already mentioned, you guys do clearly see the importance of social emotional needs and learning and the intersection of all of it. Because the chicken and the egg, So as you know, there is a challenge in that regard. So we know that there is a need for developing, rehearsing, supporting social emotional skills at all ages. And the school counselors, the school social workers, and the school psychologists have been working tirelessly to make connections, build relationships, and remove all barriers for our students so they can feel comfortable and safe to take risks to learn, because that's what really we need to do. So knowing that, we're really showing up our Tier 1 social emotional interventions, and then we are excited about the school-based partnerships that are coming on board. We are, every time I see it, we're one step closer to having them. Tomorrow, actually, the 2 of our school-based partnerships will be coming and meeting our student support team for the first time and building a relationship together so we can start working together as soon as possible. So that's exciting. One more step. So they will help us be able to deploy really solid Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions based on universal screening data when we get to that point. So it's important to have those interventions in place and know what we're going to do before we move forward. So basically, there's a lot of exciting stuff happening. It's all going in the right direction. I've got an amazing team. We all on the same page about supporting the whole child. So I mean, I couldn't be happier about that. And the support team we have in place, they're incredible. So, and thank you for all your support as well. It's a whole village, so thanks.
So Chris, just quickly, what outside agencies will be reporting to student athletes with our students still that are in need?
So we have Helio Health, who is going to be coming in, being available to do some mental health counseling. We also have Access Services, which can partner with families to connect them to different services, more Tier 2 intensive things, whatever their needs are, as well as ComZone, student engagement. So that person will be trained to be able to do some maybe restorative practices or mediations and more of those more specific kinds of skills. And those are the 3 at the moment.
So is Helio Health going to be charging insurance companies?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. They basically operate like a satellite agency.
Right. I just think it's important to get that message out to parents, because I think parents expect, I don't understand this. You know, I pay taxes, and that it's a separate agency working within a school, but.
Exactly. And as we get closer to having them officially on board, then we will communicate to parents all of those details. We're waiting right now for New York State Mental Health, Office of Mental Health to approve our spaces. They're basically in queue. We're waiting. And they're not sure how long that might take. It could take, everything's in on our end. We've done everything we can. It could take up to 6 weeks. We're not sure. Nobody knows. It kind of, works at the speed of government. So great. Yeah.
One of the things just to add, and we're so pleased that Kristen has joined our team and has just jumped in, neck deep in some really acute, upsetting student and family situations. There is sometimes the opinion here that these things don't exist in the Skinny Atlas. It is all here. Some of the things that principals that I and Mrs. Moses and Mrs. Whipple and then some of the other folks have interacted with in just the past few weeks, and the amount of support our kids and our families need. It is all here, and these needs are not frivolous. These needs are not, in addition to. These are necessary things to remove those obstacles to student learning. I'm so pleased to work with a whole team of people that lead with the heart and really recognize the value of relationships. So, thank you.
One more question, if you don't mind. And I don't want to speak out of school, but just before you came on, we were sort of segregated, doing the best we could, but without kind of that mental health leadership. So have you been able to at least start looking at our practice as a whole to make sure that we are streamlined and that if we're doing a great job at this school, when we move buildings, it's consistent and not, have you kind of looked at that book, cleaned it up, and made sure that it's a forward-moving thing?
Absolutely, and we're doing sort of like an intervention assessment. Where are we? What do we need? Where are the gaps? And what professional development do different buildings need because maybe they don't have the same expertise as somebody else. So, absolutely.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Mrs. Whipple.
I have the honor of being last and summarizing everything this great team has already said. I'm Jennifer Whipple. My primary role is, I'm the Director of Learning. My primary role is overseeing special education services for students
students aged 3 through 21 in our district. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for letting me be here, and welcome. Happy to have you. Again, I think pretty much everyone's already said what I'm also seeing. Kristen summarized it well, that there's just an overlap in everything we do. Academic services, interpersonal skills, social emotional learning, all of that just sort of weaves together and overlaps, and you can't really have one without the others. Some things I am noticing on a small scale, we're seeing some students who need some extra supports. I think Francine said it, learning to do school again, with the way the last couple of years have been. I think the expectations have been different. The accountability, student accountability has been a little different. So I am seeing a few students who just need a little extra support to understand that again. What are the expectations? What is my own personal responsibility and accountability for that? So the nice part is we have great teams, we have great support staff who are rallying around and putting plans in place and making sure everybody is getting what they need, able to, number one, identify what those needs are, and then finding the supports that students need. So that's been great. Some of the other things, I spent the morning, as I think Francine and John both talked about data, spent the morning at State Street looking at data, talking about data, using student data to make decisions and make plans and drive decisions, which is great to see teachers having those conversations. I am seeing great interventions in place. Special education services, related services are up and running. We have data from last year. We had data from the summer program, so students were able to start right back off and get back into the supports that they need. So that's, I love seeing the kids learning. Like I think Brian said, it's great having the hallways filled with students again. That's what we're here for. That's what we like seeing. And I think Eric pointed out the consistency. It's been really exciting for me to have conversations with this team about how to be consistent. What data are we looking at? Where are we housing that data so everybody who needs access to it to make student-based decisions can easily access and understand. So that's a big thing that we've been working on together as a team as well. And other than that, I think everyone else said it beautifully. So on that, let's see questions for me.
So Jen, have you seen an increase in parents reaching out, requesting evaluations for special ed services?
I've had some. I don't know that I'd say it's necessarily an increase. Again, I think we have really great conversations around, let's talk about what's in place currently. Let's talk about the instruction that's occurred already. Let's look at the data. Let's take a look at what we currently have. We just have, we have been looking at the most recent Ames Web data. So again, without numbers right in front of me, I don't feel like it's been a huge increase. I think there's been questions, but I think that we have a lot of supports in place right now, like we normally would, just in terms of that response to intervention piece. Are we providing the instruction? What does the instruction look like? What's the time frame that we're going to be monitoring those interventions? So not yet.
Thank you.
So a lot of the, well, at my school, there's a big BOCES component. A lot of the BOCES classrooms are there, so I see the busing every day. Any issues with, I'm noticing a lot of schools, the kids are leaving early, or, 15 minutes a day adds up over a week, or over 2 weeks, or 20 minutes to a half hour. Any issues with bus drivers as far as Skinny Atlas and getting our kids to and from programs on time and getting them?
Not yet.
No?
Actually, there is that regulation around how much time they have in school, so I keep saying not yet. So we monitor that. I just actually had a communication with BOCES recently. We had to make some adjustments to a bus schedule between, I think, your building and a different building. And then something else has since changed, so we're adjusting it back. I was just emailing with transportation today. They're very responsive. They seem to have what they need, and we're making sure students are there for the hours they need to be there and getting the instruction and the supports and the classroom instruction that they need. So again, not yet.
Okay. Well, I'm available if you need.
Oh, good job. Good job.
Bring them home.
Look at it.
We may call you.
Yeah.
I know, I've done that.
Yeah, right.
I'm
coming home.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you. I think lastly, and I should have tagged him on with Mr. Santoro when he started, but he was seated out of order. Mr. Major deals with a lot of the behaviors and the situations at the high school level that really have consequences at that age. So,
Well, they're bad. And it's been fun, it really has been. And they've been left up, for a better, lack of a better term, to their own devices on social media for a couple of years. So we are definitely renewing. We have some situations on making relationships and connections, with some more than others, but that's kind of the way it goes. We've been dealing with that. The kids are doing really well though in high school. I think it's just great to have them back again. I do know we're only operating 109%. The high school sign is dead at the high school. Greg will not be able to sleep tonight, but we'll get it fixed tomorrow.
You're working again for too many years?
I want to thank Gary for coming on. Funny story. Gary coached one of my kids, and it kind of relates to what we're doing. When you coach, you make connections with kids. And Gary's team's killing this team. And Patrick's on his 14th grade when he slows down and it does something. Gary goes, "What are you doing, Patrick?" And Gary goes, no, we go. They catch up. And so that's what we're doing now. And we've definitely have some work in place to catch those kids up. And I think we're in a good space being back together again. So thank you.
Has there been a lot of issue with the TikTok challenge?
There's always an issue with the next media up. That's the good one now. I mean, it just continues. It goes on and on. And, there's been some issues, not so much with TikTok, but they always find something that they're going to bring to me.
we personally recovered several soap dispensers, but in true Skinny-Atlas fashion, they were returned like filled up and loaded.
I call them my white collar
Thank you, and lastly, Heather Buff, and I told Heather I wasn't going to put her on the spot to speak, but I just want to point Heather out, and I want to say thank you publicly. Everything works here.
Why would you say that?
Everything works. This is the first place I have ever worked where everything works all the time, and Heather and her team behind the scenes are critically responsible for that. And it's just so easy to overlook and to not stop and sincerely say thank you. And your predecessor, Paul, for the work that you guys did to put this in place where we can overlook it, where it's just expected that things work. So sincerely thank you.
Thank you. You scared me there.
And that is all. Thank you, Mr. Linden.
All right, Mr. Knuth, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you all.
Appreciate all your staff.
Thank you for being here.
Very informative. Ready for Ray to continue on then? Let's turn things over to Mr. Connor Brown for the school business manager report.
Thank you, Tom. And again, having mentioned officially, we'll welcome Mr. Campbell. Connor Brown, school business manager.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. So for those in the audience who cannot see this, this is on board docs. So I'm just going to go to the turn report. It just updates where we are construction-wise. Currently, a $36.5 million authorization. So as everybody knows, a lot has been going on. So if you do have questions as we go on, feel free to ask. But I'll just do a high level, just so everybody knows how to understand the report and what's going on here. So usually a lot of pictures here. This is our middle school gym. It was projected to be done around August 31st, but we were around 3 months behind. So it's looking towards Thanksgiving, maybe a little bit after. And as Francine said, we're waiting on books because we can't get them. Imagine doing a $36 million project. How many things are delayed? Can't get. We have to wait for the glass on the top of the gym for more than 2.5 months, so that's just that alone.
So would you say the delays on this are due to supply issues, not them being behind on the work? I mean, obviously they're behind on work, but is it because of the supply issue?
I would say it's a few issues. That's definitely one of the major issues, but I would say with the amount of work that went on this summer, replacing 188 windows, and within 10 weeks, doing everything internally that we did, ripping out ceiling, putting in carpet. A lot of this work was, as we got down the stretch towards the end of summer, was, all right, we're pulling you over here to do the classrooms because that was our priority. So that did add a little bit onto it because we had to get kids in the buildings. That was definitely our top priority. But now we have been very blunt with contractors to refocus and full force ahead on the gym, because we know this is a large instructional space that can be used for a lot of things, so we're definitely very cognizant of the importance of this getting done.
So just to jump in there, Danielle, also two major things were availability of labor. There were labor shortages, and just like school personnel, construction management companies also experienced COVID closures, infections, quarantine orders, things like that. So each of these things sort of kicks the can further down the road.
Yeah, thank you. So it's just a plethora of things, but there are definitely a few major things that we just mentioned. So just a quick financial overview. So in this $36.5 million project, we are in currently 4 phases. The first one is closed out, and that was just on Waterman. So this is just a sneak peek at the second, third, and fourth phases. So if you take this $29.9 million and add it in construction budget and add it to the incidental budget, that gives you a remaining amount minus our phase 1 that we have already closed out. So taking into account everything, potential change orders. So as you go through a project, many things are going to be changed. You open up the wall, you're going to find more. You want to do something else. Things happen throughout a 2.5-year project. So those change orders to date were almost $1.2 million.
An example would be asbestos found in the mastic of our windows, our 180 plus windows that were removed. So each of those classrooms had to be mitigated.
Correct. And again, this was an authorization back in 2017, 4 years ago. Sometimes things deteriorate a little bit more over 4 years. So we said, you know, this wasn't in the scope of the bid. What do you think we should get this done now? So we added on, or sometimes take it back if it's not in bad shape. But if you see here our construction budget, we still have over $1 million. In our incidental budget, we have over $743,000. So almost about $1.8 million left in that authorization. And as you know, in 2020, in November, there was another authorization for a $21.5 million project. Those two have very similar scopes. So we can use that money to fund this next project where we see fit, but it has to fit in that scope that was authorized by the voters. So just an example, in the 2017 project, this building was not in the scope, so we could not use any of those funds on this building. But the $21.5 million does include this building, so we can use those funds. So you got to be very careful about where you use those funds, because there's always going to be an audit at some point. It's only a matter of time until they come in and pull the books back. So again, here we are 83% complete through this project. Construction-wise, and on the right, there's various project updates. We have middle school gym, we just talked about that. The curtain walls are being built up on the west side. Those are not structural walls, so they're last to go. So once those are enclosed, it'll be weatherproof, and then we can start and get the floor in there and start making headway on that. There's a lot of duct work going on right now, and that started last week. So high school auditorium renovations. Thankfully, we were able to have staff members at our opening day back in September. It was great to get everybody back together, because we hadn't done that since COVID started. So this is going to be a great space as of right now. There's a snap line of October 15th, where that can be turned over to us. And as of right now, the fall play will be held in the high school auditorium, and that will be the end of the week, the first week in November. So that will be very exciting. There's some delays on some things, but we are working with other companies or the new auditorium at Waterman, see if we can repurpose some of those lighting to bring over. But we are doing our best and pushing forward to have that play there. As I said, the middle school window replacement, 100% of those windows were taken out, 188. I think just that alone was a feat for the summer. And there's just so many other things that were going on. The third space, middle school third grade space, on the next page there's some pictures of that. Right across the hall from that is the new fax room. Colleen O'Hara does a great job with that. I mean, she has new sewing kits, new ovens, new everything there. And it's just phenomenal space to have our kids learn some very good things. Then we have our phase 3, so everything right there was phase 2, with a lot more. And our phase 3 was our boiler replacement at Waterman. That project went extremely smoothly. Boilers are up and running. They're basically just doing punch list stuff this week, so that went very well. It's going to be closed out. A small phase, but important phase, and then phase 4, which was just bid a couple months ago, which is high school commons canopy demolition up by the turf. There's scoreboards going in at other fields, like the softball field. There are bathroom replacements, and one of the bigger things is the transportation roof. So on this next page, just a lot of pictures of the gym. So here's the third space up here from one side, on the left, and then another side on the right. New tile work that went phenomenally well in the middle school stairway, but long overdue. As you can see in the top right, one of our fish bowls that was also knocked down and being repurposed. We have some storage on it. We have great storage on the left and right, and that has always been a troublesome thing here is finding storage space. And then in this middle here, it's going to be a lot of flexible seating arrangements where people can move tables, collaborate. And then on the other side of the wall, there's going to be a smart board where kids can collaborate as well. So making that space a collaborative space rather than a pass-through space. So very good stuff here. We did a whole new middle school office renovation, which was long overdue. New desk, new floor, new carpet, paint, all the other stuff. Again, a lot of things going on. More pictures here. Here's the water and boilers in the middle. On the right, the canopy. And you see just here on this bottom right, just how much deterioration there actually was here. This was actually a really big problem with water mitigation. And glad we tackled this when we did. We peeled back the concrete, and those steel slabs were basically no more.
Swiss cheese rust.
Yes.
They're not that old, were they?
No,
Yeah.
10 years old now.
Yeah.
And then a lot of site work, paving in the parking lots. So just a lot of stuff going on. I just wanted to take you through this just to show you where, how you can read this, and over on the left here. So we always do safety inspections. We had 42 safety inspections. There's only one incident to date. Quality controls, 637 quality control tests performed. RFI, request for information. So if something's going on, a contractor has a question, they submit an RFI to the contractor or construction manager and architects to figure out exactly what's going on. Sometimes that does potentially cause a potential change order, something that some other stuff that we might want to do. Submittals, 95% complete. That's basically just all on contracts and then other potential change orders that have been submitted to date.
And this whole document is on the Board doc, so the public can see it.
This whole document, as well as a full budget sheet that breaks down all the potential change orders. So just for an example, for the general contractor, there's almost about 150 change orders just for the general contractor. So very extensive. If anybody has questions on it, please reach out for sure.
Does Steve have a plan A and B for that gym isn't ready with basketball season with all the teams?
We are working that out as we speak.
Yeah. I just know they were practicing very late last year because they were
Yeah.
down to one gym, so.
Yeah, I know we're trying to see what we can do with partnering with the Y and other things, so.
Hopefully we won't have to, but.
That's all I have for construction. Any questions there? And then just the last thing that I had, just the ARP application update that was submitted just right at the end of September with a lot of feedback from the community, administrators, faculty, the board. So basically the highlights of this application focused on basically social, what you heard everybody here talking about, social emotional recognition, mental health awareness, professional development, before, during, after school, credit recovery, tutoring, all these support services to help our students. As Brian Cohen mentioned, we had to repurpose a lot of those AIS people to remote instruction people last year, so now they are back in the classroom. We are giving them everything they need to do everything they need. And then a lot of training going on, reading specialists, and again, a lot of tutoring and support recognition. So I just want to give everybody an update on that. And as I've said, these aren't final submissions. These will be amended. We'll see what works as we go on. And again, from the community, from the board, from everybody, we love to solicit information. Please reach out if you have ideas or needs or worries. So,
Thank you, Connor.
Thank you. Board members, if there are no further questions for Connor, we'll continue with the meeting on new business. I'd like to group items A, B, C, and D together under personnel into one motion. So if I could receive a motion from a board member to that effect.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion on A, B, C, and D. Hearing no discussions, all in favor of voting on motions A, B, C, and D, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and Mrs. York, I recuse myself from this motion due to coaches, my role as an unpaid volunteer certified coach. Continuing on, item E is approval of the BOCES transportation contracts. Two contracts, one in the amount of a little bit over $5,000, the other contract in the amount of in the 20s. So a motion from a board member for approval of those BOCES transportation contracts.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor of approving the BOCES transportation contracts, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Next is item F, approval of the bid award for the 2021 to 2022 capital outlay project. This is the annual outlay project, up to $100,000. In this case, it's to CNS companies for $83,767.
So moved. Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any questions, any comments?
Connor, is this going to continue with a door replacement?
this is more doors, yes, correct, yeah.
Is there further discussion? And all in favor of approving the bid award for the upcoming capital outlay project, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Next is a two-prime disposal request. And this is, if I recall correctly, for obsolete technology, as well as, slips my mind what the first disposal item was.
Connor, do you recall?
Those are just some, some.
Yeah, it was like
Oh.
paperwork or
records from
something.
the middle
Absolute
school.
records. Right. Thank you. So obsolete records and obsolete technology.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on the items for disposal? Okay, then all in favor of approving that disposal request, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we do approve parting with those items. Okay, next is item H, year-end reserve funding for this current school year. For actually covering the funds from the past school year. Proposal would be to put $2.5 million in capital reserve, $15,477 in the tax certiorari, EBLAR, $348,595, and teachers' requirement sub-fund reserve, $231,584.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any questions on this motion? Presumably for Connor. Okay, and hearing no questions, all in favor of allocating those monies to those reserves, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we do enact that fund for. Next is financial reports. These are the financial reports for the months of July and August. I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion, questions on the financial reports? Danielle, do you want to give the mic?
Yes, Mike, Connor, anything out of the ordinary we need to know here?
The only thing is just as Mike touched about is the GASB 84 compliance. You'll see accounts titled differently. Instead of payroll, you'll see general fund payroll. Instead of the trust and agency, you'll see general fund trust and agency. So just that repurposing just into a new account. So just accounting.
Any further questions, discussion? Okay, then all in favor of approving the financial reports for the months of July and August, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Finally, under new business, we have 6 committee on preschool special ed reports and 6 committee on special ed reports.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion or questions on the reports? Okay, then all in favor of approving those reports for tonight, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. We're now in process review. I'd like to create an agenda setting team for the October 19th meeting, and this will be people to meet on October 12th at either 8 a.m. or 4 p.m.
Tom, if I could interject just real quick. In looking at our calendar, we had an October 19th meeting scheduled, which is 2 weeks from today. And then we have a November 2nd meeting also scheduled. And I didn't know if the board wanted to entertain eliminating the October 19th meeting so that we can meet in November. All of our, and this like time specific appointments, things like coaches, those are done already. So as far as we can tell right now, there's no need for that special October 19th meeting. So I didn't know if the board wanted to entertain eliminating that meeting.
I'm fine with that, there's nothing that we need to discuss.
Sounds like we will eliminate the October 19th meeting and next meeting on November 2nd.
We can coordinate through Rebecca for agenda setting.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, before us, discussion about the standing committees for this current school year, namely our one required committee, which is audit, budget, and finance, and the 3 elective committees that we have, which are policy, proposed, strategic planning committee, and curriculum, instruction, and assessment committee. So we'd like to develop membership for these committees and determine our meeting schedule for the committees. So I'll put this out there for board members tonight. We don't have to decide on the spot, but please get your interest in. I would suggest we funnel these into Mike Kell, President Kell, and it would be your preferences for committee assignments.
What are we doing about wellness?
Right now, because of the way the focus of the previous wellness committee has changed significantly, so that there is no wellness committee currently scheduled. That can be looked at again. That can be reassessed. But right now, that wasn't on the committees that we had established for the year. And then the communications committee we folded into, if you recall, the ABF committee.
And what will the process be for soliciting community involvement in these various committees?
So once we have dates.
Especially the fun one, ABF.
Yes.
Anyone wants to? It is a good time on a Monday night, I promise you.
Once we have a date structure established for once a month and times associated, whatever that is, then I can advertise that to the community and seek community input, specifically for policy, strategic planning, and curriculum instruction and assessment. That's something that we really want to get additional input for. ABF has been historically a tough sell. We have a dedicated cadre of people that have done incredible work for us,
But
but
if you think that sounds like fun,
Yeah.
you should put your name in that you'd be interested in joining.
absolutely.
A
So
lot of numbers.
I think what we were trying to establish is when people can meet and how often. Typically, these are monthly meetings. We can pick a day of the week and run several meetings back to back. We try to keep them to about an hour. We try to be sensitive of everybody's time so that they're not here 4 nights a week for committee meetings.
So not to sound too much like a slacker, but is a additional monthly obligation too much for people? Is it better maybe to consider these on a once per marking period basis? I'll just put that out there.
We can also tack them onto a board meeting night if you
Yeah.
so choose, depending on your availability.
I would fight at the curriculum instruction and assessment committee. That's my wheelhouse there.
For community involvement, we can also put just a blurb out there on this fall newsletter as well, just to solicit feedback or
Interest.
That would be good. So is it fair game for Connor to list these 4 committees in the newsletter then? Board members agree on that?
Absolutely.
So we have consensus on that. I put my preference in for ABF again.
Take your time.
I'll do ABS again. Someone's got to be the one that doesn't really understand it, just to bring out the questions of the non-ABS citizens of the community.
But now the strategic plan.
Strategic plan, yeah.
Put me down for wellness. No.
That's all.
That's a committee of one.
Gary, you were gonna say?
I'm gonna do EDF, unless it's all chock full already.
Can we just discuss it for a second? Like, I didn't realize wellness was going away.
It's not necessarily going away, we just wanted to reinvent what it was supposed to be. So if that's another committee that we want to bring back, absolutely, we can do that. This is something Kristen Moses and I have talked about. But the focus, I think, is going to be different than what it was.
I thought it was beneficial. I mean, it definitely needed an agenda. It was a big group, but I thought we came up with some good things and some, specifically tonight, like the test that came out of that,
Yeah.
And I don't know.
The problem was the term was too broad and all encompassing.
I agree with that.
And that people had a lot of different ideas. I
Yes.
think we need to really specifically define what that committee is going to be for and what their focus will be.
Okay. And I'm good with that, if we could just keep that on the back burner and define it more, but not get rid of it,
Sure.
let's say, or reinvent it or whatever. But
Yeah.
I personally think that's a very important one. And I would do strategic planning as well.
I can try my hand at policy. Nobody's
It's
done
not
it.
bad. I'll do it with you.
At that one,
Mike's
but.
not here, remember, Mike's not here, so we can.
Ah,
voluntold.
we-
I captured all these, if you'd like, I'll communicate that to Mike.
So why don't you move me from ABF to policy
Okay.
also? Because I think we'll have 3 already on ABF because.
So Gary,
Unless you really want to do ABF, I'm fine with that. I'm
That
fine.
would be,
how to do
I
that?
can be the voice of history on policy. That's policy is something that's.
That'd be hugely helpful, thank you.
Okay.
Great, and then we'll figure out a proposed meeting schedule and float it to the board for approval.
Yep, and we'll see where Mike wants to be involved or if he wants to be ad hoc. And,
Perfect.
which would be about-
Rebecca and I can work on that tomorrow.
Yeah.
Board meeting nights, I figure you're here anyway. The only issue is if it runs up into executive session. So that would put us at 5 o'clock. If we did hour-long committee meetings, 5 o'clock board nights.
My only pushback on that is 5 o'clock. If we are trying to get our community members involved, a lot of us, all 7 members of this board included, work full-time jobs, as do a lot of community members, and 5 o'clock, I would just suggest we don't confirm that now and we go home and we sleep on that, because I think that's a push, and we are trying to get more people included, not, oh, sorry, you can't make it, you're out, because we meet at 5. So, as much as I would love to hammer out my nights away to one consolidated period, I do want to make sure we give more people opportunities. So I just would say, maybe can we table that till we all kind of digest that a little bit before we commit?
Absolutely. We want participation, so thank you. All right.
Good, okay. So that retires the committee discussion for tonight. Now the second opportunity for public comment. So, are there members who have made it to a meeting? You have well deserved the time to speak to us if you would like to. If not, maybe we will put you next meeting. We will should be attending that. If there's no further business before the board, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on adjourning at 9:02? Okay, then all in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're now adjourned.
Thank you so much.